October 7th, 2024. The time is 7 p.m. Liam, would you please call the roll?
Member Wired?
Here.
Member Owens? Member Cleister?
Here.
Member Stroya?
Here.
Member Warren?
Here.
Member Thiene?
Here.
Member Orr?
Here.
6 present.
Motion to excuse Member Owens.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's start off with finance and property. And Stephanie, I'll let you.
Okay, so we're starting in with the budget, and not really starting in, kind of more the final stages, because it just doesn't start tonight. It started months ago, meeting with various departments and having them really understand the budget. And so tonight, Ben did a really nice job of tying revenue, I guess, to each of the items within the departments. And I was talking to someone, and they were very complimentary because they were able to then explain it to their department, and there was definitely a aha moment of like, oh, I get how this finally works. It's not so arbitrary. So I know you have a presentation to do, so we'll do that, and then if there's any questions. Sound good?
The mayor has a few words.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to make a short introduction. Hopefully it won't be more than 10 minutes, so please bear with me, okay? But I have some things I want to share with our committee and our council tonight. So welcome all. And let me begin by thanking the City Council for our strong collaboration in stewarding our resources during the current and past recent years. In reviewing and approving the annual city budget, you play the vital role in ensuring that we allocate our resources responsibly and in accordance with our community's values, and with a view toward helping all our residents thrive and prosper here for generations to come. I want to thank the administration and staff members who have worked so hard on this year to help compile the budget reports, along with the members of the Mayor's Office, especially Director of Administration Catherine Farina, Deputy Director of Administration Ben Young. I want to recognize all the hard-working department heads who have made special efforts over the last year to measure their progress toward goals and use that information to establish the 2025 budget goals and requests. We are grateful for all the hard work and determination of the Finance Director Gina Alabak, Deputy Director of Finance Jim Berdovich, and their staff for dedicated efforts to assemble this budget. And thanks to all the people who work for the City of North Canton. Your loyalty and commitment to North Canton is what makes the city a success story. We cannot thank you enough for all the work you do. So, the City of North Canton strives to be a desired community of choice in a Northeast Ohio to live, work, and play. A city committed to the excellence with a progressive downtown, guided by a small town sense of community. The City of North Canton will provide superior service to the community we serve in the most time-responsive, cost-efficient, responsible, and professional manner. We seek to continuously improve the quality of community life for the residential, business, and educational communities we serve. North Canton is on the rise. The last 5 years of our lives and the life of our dear community has faced challenges that evaluated our resilience, adaptability, and determination to remain competitive, strong, safe, and vibrant. These challenges, while daunting, also present a unique chance for personal, professional, and community growth. Step back in time with me just for a second here. Transforming change and challenges into opportunities is nothing new to our community. Frank G. Hoover, better known as FG, spoke of change in a chapter of his book, The Fabulous Dustpan, New Berlin versus North Canton, the Hoover Company's story for survival and success. He writes, "Change is a painful but exciting phenomenon. It is the basis of any and every story, this one included. The struggle of the active versus the passive, the duel between the dynamic and the static. The Hoover Company went from was a small business, from a small business making horse collars to mass production of vacuum cleaners, and the name Hoover became a household name brand known around the world." I trust in those same tenets in sustaining a vibrant community. We know that we must continue to be vigilant to preserve the safety, civility, and justice we all want for all of us here everywhere in the city. We know that national and state trends of divisiveness and disinvestment can cascade down to our community in so many ways, demanding our steady resolve to protect the welcoming atmosphere, the high quality of life, the diverse and creative culture that we all cherish. Now, just a brief preliminary comment about what you'll hear and what you will not hear as we present the 2025 budget process. You will hear an extremely focused effort to present this budget in a new format, revenue matching budgeting. That means we outline and organize the entire budget around each department's key activities or programs and its revenue source rather than budget categories. For example, you will hear that recreation rental funds are dedicated to investments in parks or hotel tax dedicated to our economic development, versus what was typical in the past, what I would call the category-based products or budgets, showing just personnel costs and equipment costs, service costs for a wide range of programs without assigning them by activity or program. Now, this revenue matching based budgeting is central to helping all of us identify the real investments and choices we make in the budget. It helps us say what we will do as we are developing the reviewing projects, and reviewing budgets, I should say. It's also new, so please be prepared that this is a work in progress as we continue our transparency and adaptability or accountability in detail. Now, inevitably, past efforts will be reinforced or highlighted as we present the 25 budget, but mostly we'll look ahead to 2025 choices and review some past activities. And you're going to hear several things. Talk about capital investment plan, balanced general budget, or excuse me, a balanced general fund, staff choose reductions, and revenue matching. Ben will get into those a little bit later. It is important to remember that this operating budget reflects spending to use, enhance, and protect the assets stewarded by our 14 departments. This we achieve as we continue to find the right balance between affordable and effective and balancing the both. But more than that, we continue our commitment to keep our general fund reserves above the 25% carryover. Let us consider a couple key principles strategic to the budget. Invest in our people. Our government belongs to the people and is run up and operated 24/7, 365 days a year by our people, our 140 employees. They are our most precious resource, and we continue to focus our supporting all of our employees in this budget. With City Council's support, we have continued to invest in our people, and building skills and capacities is a great investment for our city government, including regular and part-time employees. Now, focus on transparency and accountability, which I think our city has been very open over the last several years. That's another principle to look at. And this year, as already mentioned, we are excited to present a city budget that has been developed using a revenue matching model rather than a traditional line item or category-based budget. This transparency will directly connecting funding to activities and outcomes also strongly supports accountability, as it is far easier to track investments and results. This will allow us, the administration, council members, and all community members, a clear view of each department's objectives and their results to hold each other accountable for these results. The commitment to transparency and accountability guides all our operations at the city. It is why we make all the documents relating to city governance available on our website, from resolutions and ordinances to the board and commission meeting minutes. We intend and believe that the 2025 budget sets a new standard of that transparency and accountability for all of us. And finally, as a principle, we want to get the basics right. That is to say, be good stewards of resources, protecting against downturns with healthy revenue reserves, and investing in the maintenance and upkeep and replacements of equipment and buildings as needed, and keeping the basic functions of government working well. Public safety, infrastructure, affordability, amenities, and other quality of life components. So our community continues to thrive as a creative and welcoming place to live. I would like to speak just one more minute in a broad sense with a reminder of what we have done together and to emphasize our continuing priorities for 2025. Economic health, public safety, and efficient operations, all to lead to a better quality of life for all people who call North Canton home. You will see those priorities repeatedly expressed in the investment we propose. So you'll see in the budget a continuing emphasis on supporting our economic vitality, while investments in infrastructure, parks, streets, public safety, inventiveness, I like that word myself, and sustainability, and all to keep this a great place to live, work, and raise a family. So in closing, you will see in 2025 the capital investments are central, allocated to capital like fire and police requests, other fleet vehicles, paving, building repairs, and the like. You will see in the 2025 budget continued focus on improving our efficiency and delivering better quality services. All of this in the 2025 budget will support our priorities to help continue our path toward a city that is increasingly vibrant, just, creative, fun, safe, accessible, sustainable, and thriving. All these efforts and more in the 2025 budget plans embody this community's values to be a place that embraces all our residents and believes we need always to do our best to support opportunity for all. And I encourage you to support all of them. Well, it's time for me to get out of the way and for more details to come. And on behalf of the city administration and its fellow employees, I am incredibly pleased to present the 2025 budget proposal for your review and consideration. It is an honor to collaborate with you and to continue the energetic progress we are making as a community, to be the best place we can be for the individuals and families who call this incredibly special North Canton their home. So now I invite Deputy Director of Administration Ben Young, who will lead us on a slide presentation introducing the 2025 budget proposal. I want to thank you for your time and attention and allowing me to give an introduction as we go forward in presenting the 2025 budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You're welcome. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It is my pleasure tonight to present to you all on behalf of the mayor and professional staff the 2025 budget proposal for council's consideration this evening. But before we get to the numbers, it's a personal goal of mine and a goal of our team to make this the most transparent budget possible. And in order to do that, context is incredibly important. And so we first have to answer an important question that several of you have asked us to answer, and I'm sure that most, if not all of you, have been asked by your constituents, which is, how did we get here? How did we end up in a budget crisis or a recurring revenue issue or whatever your chosen term is? Back a slide. So the first portion of our conversation tonight will be me trying to answer that question to the best of my ability to ensure that all of us here in this room making decisions, all of the public watching, everyone involved understands the environment that led to the fiscal spot we're in, and therefore the environment that this budget was created in. So first, though, I want to define what is here. So what is this crisis? So our city is facing two separate but equally important budget challenges. Number one is in our operating budget, we have been continually overspending our revenues for several years. So basically what that means is we're spending from our savings account to fund our operations in each year. Second, in our capital budget, so the other half of our budget, our needs and the asks from our departments and from the public are greatly outstripping the revenues we have available, which leads to delayed repairs and replacements and a lack of investment. So these two things together are what get us to this point we're at of considering major cuts, like the dispatch conversation we had, considering revenue increases like issue 7, or major reorganizations like bringing the permits department back in-house. So back to the question at hand, why are we here? How did our city find itself in this difficult point? And it's really a natural progression of the past 20 years of decisions, both internal to the city and external to the city. And as much as I know that we all crave some single point or mistake to point to say that was the point where it all went wrong, if only they hadn't done that, then we'd be fine. It isn't that simple. There isn't one decision, one misstep that led us here. It's a series of events over time. And as we move through these discussions tonight, and I do a very brief history of the last 20 years, I want to say up front that I don't think anybody at any time made the wrong decision. Every actor throughout these past 20 years made the best decision they felt for the future of our city or the state they were leading or whatever body they belonged to from their vantage point at that time. It's real easy for us now in 24 to look back and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, because I know what happens and you shouldn't have done that. But obviously they didn't know what would happen. So as we go through this, I think two fundamental themes are going to come out. And the first is, how do we deal with the loss of the Hoover Company? And the second is how to provide effective but affordable services to our residents. So before I jump into the timeline, I want to take a brief detour to touch on those two words, affordable but effective. In general, all levels of government in a democracy that serve you are trying at their most fundamental level to achieve both of these things. But both of these things are opposed to each other. And so they exist on this spectrum, which I've illustrated for you all here tonight with this speed gauge, or fuel gauge rather. On one side, you can have the most effective possible government in the world, providing every service in the blink of an eye, at the click of a button, perfectly and promptly. But it's the most expensive thing you'll ever pay for. On the other end of the spectrum, the most affordable government ever has incredibly low taxes. Maybe you never even pay taxes, but it also never paves a road, never puts out a fire, or never sends you an ambulance. It is the challenge of good governance to keep our arrow somewhere in the middle of this dial, attempting to achieve the most effective possible service at the most affordable possible cost. So keep this in mind as we go through our story here. So we begin our journey at the turn of the 21st century. It's an open secret at this point that Hoover is uncertain that it might not be here forever. Globalization has fundamentally changed their business model, and they've already started some reductions. Unfortunately, the city chooses to react politically instead of practically. The city can see the threat on the horizon, and we start to try and take actions like changing our zoning code, but political infighting slows that process down, and it ends up taking 3 or 5 years, depending on how you look at it, to rewrite a simple zoning code. And the drama between politicians overshadows any real reforms that are made. So then in 2006, a new majority that I'm going to call the reformers for tonight takes over the majority on council. And they start a concerted effort to make North Canton government more efficient and more consolidated. Just because it's very relevant to things that are going on in our community right now, my example for this is one of the efforts those people undertake is that they look at the fire department and the EMS department and they say that there's too much overhead here. Why are we paying for management in 2 departments when we could just have one? And they combine them into what we know today as the North Canton Fire Department and hire the first full-time professional firefighter EMT, our current chief, Drew Perry. So then we move forward into 2008. And things were looking okay. The reformers were consolidating, we were getting more efficient. A new administration takes office. They're also seeking to move past the political drama. But the world has other plans. In 2008, the last of the Hoover jobs officially leave. We lose all of the income tax we were previously gaining. And to just put a cherry on top, the world hits a global financial crisis. Our income tax revenues will not return to these pre-2008 levels for a decade. So we, like the rest of the world, react to the financial crisis. We enact large budget cuts, affects every department. Every department gets cut, nobody goes unscathed. And you can compare this to the austerity that took place at the federal level. This is when the previous budget cycle, before Gina was here, that required every department head to come in and defend line item by line item their whole budget started, because the goal became affordability at all costs. Can we afford it? The priority was just to keep basic functions happening, because that's all we could afford. And this period that I'm going to call the status quo period lasts for roughly a decade of our history. But during that history, the outside blows don't stop coming. So the state of Ohio reacts to the 2008 financial crisis too, and they choose to target local taxes as the thing that is breaking the back of residents and businesses. And so in 2009, they repeal a tax that some of you may remember, some of you may not, called TPP, or Tangible Personal Property. And this was formerly a large revenue source for the city, especially when the Hoover factory was functioning, because how TPP worked is you taxed the value of all that heavy equipment sitting in the factory. So in 2011, to try and fill that gap, we enact our first permanent iteration of the fire and EMS levies that we know today, and that we renew and generally increase every 5 years. Another step towards a full-time professional fire department. I bring that up just because of other things that are going on in North Canton. But we're not done yet. In 2012, the state cuts their contributions to local government funding roughly in half. It's a little more nuanced than that, but ultimately roughly in half. And this greatly decreases revenues, not just for North Canton, but for municipalities around the state. And then finally, in 2013, the state repeals the estate tax. And to put the potential value of the estate tax into context for you all, Jackson Township's Safety Service Center was entirely funded off of the state tax collected shortly before it was repealed by the state of Ohio. So where do we end up after this decade of declining revenues and just keeping the wheels on the bus? We're now at 2017. We've lost or seen reductions in 4 key funding revenues: income tax from Hoover, TPP, LGF subsidies, and the estate tax. In response, we've entered this status quo period. We've reduced staff, we froze wages for non-union employees, and we delayed lots of capital investments. On that spectrum of affordable versus effective we talked about earlier, our needle is pretty strongly on the affordable side, and we've kind of lost sight of the effective. And that starts to create a problem. So forgive my Catholic school for coming out here, but to quote St. Thomas Aquinas, if the highest aim of a ship captain was to preserve his ship, he would keep it in port forever. The highest aim of our government isn't to save money, to stay in port forever. The highest aim is to provide services. And by 2017, the public was starting to notice the decline in services. Roads weren't getting paved, parks weren't being fixed up. It started to become real obvious. So in 2018, there's a reverse course. To stick with my ship metaphor, our ship was managing to stay afloat, but it was covered in a bunch of duct tape patches, and it probably needed more permanent solutions. Our community was frustrated by the slow economic recovery, the vacant buildings on Main Street, and the lack of capital investment in city infrastructure. They remembered how services functioned pre-2008, when Hoover was here and we had money. And they wanted that standard of service back. So the city reverses course. We start investing in staff in all departments. We restart a capital program. We start securing large grants again. We dust off the 2012 master plan and end up nearly completing all of its proposed projects. We flipped on that spectrum back from affordable all the way to effective. And as a sort of crown jewel, we start our land banking program. We had seen what leaving it to private developers got us. Nothing. Across the street to this day from City Hall is still vacant. And it was and is an opportunity to control our own economic destiny. But unforeseen complications from COVID mean that we haven't been able to resell as quickly as we hoped. And we're starting to have debt add up. So that gets us to here, today, now, this budget, 2024. Our ship is fixed. It looks better than it has in years. It's running well. We're sailing smoothly, to keep with my metaphor. But without that revenue we once had, we can't afford to keep this level of service going. To put our revenue loss in perspective, and to answer the question that I'm sure some of you have, or some people watching have, of, well, we used to be able to do this, what happened? Before Hoover left, we raised $8 million a year in income taxes. After Hoover's departure, we didn't get back up to 18 million until 2019. But in terms of real dollars with inflation, that meant in 2019 we were still $1.7 million short of where we were in 2007. More than a decade later. Add on to that loss, the loss of the LGF, the TPP, and the estate tax. So, we have to ask ourselves, where can we trim, cut, or improve to keep a ship that maybe isn't the perfect, beautiful ship, but is a really nice ship? More simply, how do we prioritize both effectiveness and affordability to keep the best city possible and avoid another boom-bust cycle? If we are unable or unwilling to make cuts, then how do we increase revenues instead? That story of the last 20 years of North Canton is what informed the creation of the budget proposal we have for you all tonight. Staff has done our best to find the right balance between affordable and effective, while still providing every service that this council has prioritized as we must provide. Some of the things that we'll talk about tonight are for the sake of affordability, such as bringing back in-house a building department. Some of the things we'll propose tonight are for the sake of effective service, like adding 3 lieutenants to the fire department, staff a 3rd ambulance. Good governance requires both, and we can't blindly spend or blindly cut our way to success. So now that we've set the scene, let's dive into the 2025 proposed budget. All right, in creating this year's budget, there are 4 important policy changes that we have made in the process of how this gets done. First, as Councilwoman Warren alluded to, and the mayor, we have instituted a practice of revenue matching. What this means is we take a source of revenue and we match it to a specific department or program. This allows us to better track our leading or our biggest cost centers, but it also helps us to control potential overspending in those cost centers by setting a cap on the amount of resources those centers can take. This change is definitely on the affordability side of the spectrum. And we'll go through our revenue matching budget when we get to each department. Second, if cuts were necessary in a department this year, instead of administration making the cuts sort of in a vacuum and going back to the department and saying, I'm sorry, we weren't funding X, we went to that department head and said, you need to cut $10,000, you tell us where it's coming from. This enhances our effectiveness by letting the experts in the department prioritize what they need most within the resources they have. Third, through using revenue matching, and particularly to Chief Kemp's credit, as he's the largest member of the general fund, working with Chief Kemp, for the first time in years, the general fund and all of the departments that exist in it were balanced before any transfers out of the general fund were needed to help somebody else. So everybody that lives in the general fund came in under budget and under the resources they had. And then fourth and finally, we have begun to reinstitute a capital investment plan. This is a long-term planning tool that the city used to use. I found some in old boxes. And over the course of next year, we will be coming back to council to finalize that, because best practice is to give council input, but you have an example at your seats in your packets today. And what this allows us to do is see a longer time horizon of the major capital expenses that are coming our way, and also to see how the decisions we might make in today's budget obligate the future. So for example, in the draft capital investment plan you all have, if all of the wonderful plans we have right now come to fruition, we've already obligated $4 million in capital investment 10 years from now. That's if the bond passes for the fire station and several others. That's not just because of the budget. Won't be clear. All right, so budget overall, 101. The general fund will have a 36% carryover proposed balance. The minimum required is 25%, and last year the proposed was that 25% exactly, so we have created a safer margin there. The water fund has a proposed carryover of 49%, which is just under halfway to the goal set by the federal EPA of 100%. This is some substantial progress over last year, but we still have a long way to go to hit our carryover target. Despite these positive carryovers, we are still overspending current year revenues by $1.09 million. This is the lowest overspending that staff felt could be achieved without causing a cut to a public service in some capacity. Basically, we can't get to a perfect net zero without the public seeing a service decline. And finally, the budget contains no new personnel additions other than the 3 fire lieutenants previously approved by council in conjunction with the fire and EMS union contract. All right, so here is the budget. Go ahead and click through all the pieces of the pie there for me, Liam. It's broken down by fund for everyone, and I'm sure that we all completely understand what this says, and we have no questions, correct? No, of course not, because fund accounting, while it's great for auditing, and Gina and Jim may love it, the rest of us don't quite understand it that well. And it's not so great for public presentations. So for tonight, I'm going to ask everyone to think about the budget a little bit differently. And I think a better way to think about the budget is by service category. So here is the 2025 budget proposal by service category, after we've removed transfers from the general fund, which in the standard budget get counted twice, so it inflates the number, and fiduciary funds, which are just pass-through dollars that they're not the city's money. What that means we're left with is about $39 million. Approximately 2/3, 1/3 each, are for public utilities, water, sewer, trash, storm sewer, and public safety, police, fire, dispatch, EMS. The next 15% is our public services, roads, parks, permits department. 12% is then everything else it takes to operate a government. So our income tax collection fees, our IT services, our power bills, because the city still pays power bills, our banking fees, the city still pays banking fees, all those sorts of wonderful, mundane things it takes to make life happen. And then our last 4% is management, or what we all might call City Hall. So the departments at City Hall and all of you lovely elected people. Before we get into specifics by department, I want to touch on the requests that were unable to be funded this year. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just to highlight some of the more key projects that did not happen. In particular, we had to cut a number of water line projects that our engineer and water distribution superintendent were hoping to do. That's partially because of some debt in the water fund that we'll get to in just a moment. Fire EMS, for the 4th or 5th year in a row, we've had to put off the ladder truck. We also put off 2 fire prevention vehicles. 9th Street reconstruction was going to be in conjunction with this 9th Weber water line project that we had to cut. 7th Street sidewalk, which has been a on and off thing for many years, we were unable to fund. Here in this building, repaving the parking lot, redoing the flooring in the event hall, some renovations to Dogwood Shelter, just to point out a few. There are more listed in the information council has been provided. Some are minor, some are major. All right, now we're gonna have fun going by department by department. At this point in our presentation, please feel free to jump in with any questions or comments about specific departments as we get to them. So first will be our utility departments, and this slide is what you're gonna see for every department we get to tonight. So starting with our water system, our first pie chart here is gonna be the revenues that department receives. As you can see for our water system, it's almost entirely funded off of water utility bills that we collect, as would be expected. This chart down here is that revenue matching that we talked about earlier. So for the water department, it's not that significant because it was already its own separated fund and it had its own revenues, but as we get into the general fund, this will become more relevant. For each department, you'll see their major cost centers on the right-hand side of the chart here. So for the water fund, water system, we have administration, the treatment plant, distribution, which is all the pipes under the ground, and then the water department has its own separate debt service from the city's general debt. And then finally, our pie chart on the right is a more traditional breakdown of the expenses for that department by category of expense that the mayor was talking about earlier. So personnel versus operating, capital, and debt. This year we have less capital investment than we might otherwise like. We don't have as many grants as we did last year, and we have a fairly high debt service number. However, a large portion of that debt service does roll off in the next 2 years. That debt is from 2011 and 16, thank you, Gina. And so as that rolls off, we'll be able to start doing new projects again. So major projects that are in the water system for 2025, they're replacing one of their dump trucks. It'll be financed over 2 years. This is year 1 of 2. We are replacing the water line on Dressler Everhard. Our share is $300,000, but it's a joint project with the county, and the total cost for that project is $600,000, with the county picking up the other half. The water treatment plant, for anybody who's taken the tour, we have 6 really big filters that filter out the water. They have these valves on them called Alma valves. They are, I believe, if I remember what Tad said correctly, going on 20 years old and no longer being serviced by the company. So they would like to start replacing those valves. Their proposal is to do half of them this year, half of them next year. So 3 of the 6 this year for $160,000. Kennedy Estates water line, this is a new neighborhood being built in Lake Township, I believe, which we are lucky enough to get our water lines into, and the developer is paying the majority of that water line extension, but our share is $74,000. And then finally, the booster station on our high pressure portion of our water system needs a new header manifold pipe. Please don't ask me what that is, I have no idea. But that's $85,700. All right, next is our sanitary sewer system. Just like water, this is an enterprise fund where we have utility billing fees that pay for this service. So in revenues, as you can see, utility fees is almost the entirety of their revenues. They have just 2 cost centers: administration, which is the billing costs essentially, and then the maintenance of going and cleaning sewer lines or slip lining sewer lines or whatever other maintenance happens over the year that Matt needs to take care of. Again, on the right, you have a breakdown of a more traditional view of where their funds are going to. I realize now I forgot to mention that we did upload this PowerPoint for you all into your app, if anybody wants to follow along. Wait, no. So the sewer system has just 2 major projects next year. They want to replace their Vector jet truck, which lets you suck nasty things out of clogged sewers. It will be financed over 2 years, so this is year 1 of 2. The total cost of the truck is $600,000, $300,000 this year. And then we have a sewer line joint grouting project on the north side of the city for $74,000. Without getting too technical, sometimes rainwater gets into the sewer and that's a bad thing, so this will stop rainwater from getting into it. Our next is garbage service. Just like the previous 2, this is a public utility. We charge utility fees. It only has 1 cost center administration because we contract out garbage, so almost all of the cost goes towards operating, and then a little bit personnel because we provide billing for Kimball. Next. And then our last utility is our storm sewer. Currently our storm sewer is funded off of a levy, but 2025 will be the last year of the levy, and 2026 will start a utility billing fee just like the previous 3 that we've talked about. Because currently it's a levy and we hope to continue this as we go into the utility fee, we don't intend to change this, it gets spent mostly on capital investment, which takes the form of replacing curb and gutter in various parts of the city, which leads us to our major projects for next year. 3 lovely curb and gutter projects. So on East Hill, we're doing 2,900 linear feet for $75,000. We're doing all of Freedom and Democracy Streets for $80,000, and on Westview Circle, we're doing 1,500 feet for $40,000. And our big limiting factor for why we don't do more of these every year is just time and Matt's people, our street department's people's time to do this and all their other duties. That we pick as much curb as we feel we can reasonably promise to get done in a year. All right, so that takes us into our general fund. So this is where the revenue matching starts to become more important, because general fund is traditionally been presented as just one bucket of money that a bunch of departments fight for. And so the point of revenue matching is to sort of stop those departments from fighting with each other. So our first part of the general fund is what I'm going to call City Hall, which is if you come upstairs at City Hall, the 5 departments that are located up there. So for revenue matching, what we've done functionally is to say that the 2 state programs that currently give the city money, so inside property tax millage and local government funds, are what we want to use to fund our basic services of government, our city hall, council, administration, finance, engineering. And so these 3 together is sort of the limit on where those departments can go. Can't spend more than that. That was the cap we set on them. In addition, these departments perform the civil service function. They do collect a little bit of testing fees, but not enough to fund the whole thing. And then the permits department, or development services, is funded entirely off of their permit fees. Now, this year we were successful in that the top 5 departments and development services both came in under their respective resource caps. So what that means is that this extra difference over here, this $245,000, can get put back into the general fund to help support other income tax funded functions in the general fund. Hold on. As we'd expect, all of these departments, the vast majority of their expenses are personnel. None of these departments install infrastructure, perform public services, create anything. Now, next slide. Major projects for City Hall next year. City Hall's HVAC replacement This has been cut for the past 5 years, and it failed 6 times this summer. So our building superintendent has said that it is at the point where this is no longer optional, and the HVAC really needs to be replaced. Second, we'd like to get a asset management software. This is not to be confused with the financial asset management software that finance got last year. This would be more of your Citizens 311 type reporting, as well as managing work orders and then asset life cycles from a admin side of, okay, I've sent this truck to the repair shop 5 times, is it now time to just buy a new truck? And that sort of function will really help us create a better capital investment plan and not be in the same predicament we are today, where lots of things are aging out simultaneously and we can't afford to replace them all. And then finally, if we're bringing the permits department in-house, we will need a new vehicle for the chief building official. We do have several vehicles that I am scraping together to create the rest of the fleet for the development services department, borrowing from other departments, but we are 1 vehicle short. And this vehicle will not be paid out of capital, it would be paid out of permit fees, just like the rest of that. Next slide. Our second piece of general fund, and the largest piece of general fund, is our police and dispatching services. So both of these departments are primarily funded off of income tax, and we expect them to be primarily funded off of income tax every year. For police, similar to City Hall, their vast majority of expenses is personnel. They don't create things, they don't install public infrastructure. For police, we have 2 cost centers. The first is our police department, which is roughly about $4 million. That's us actually providing police to protect the community. And then the second is our school services. That's about $600,000, and that's our SRO contract, everything that goes into the SROs, as well as crossing guards, all the equipment for crossing guards, those sorts of things. For dispatch, I think we all know what dispatch is at this point, but we do have a new line here, dispatch fees. I am happy to announce tonight that we have reached a final contract and agreement with both East Sparta Fire Department and Tri-Division EMS, who were previously at CENTCOM, but CENTCOM is now closing, and they have opted to come join NORCOM Dispatching Center for their dispatch needs. So that they won't start with us until roughly November.
Ben,
Yep.
last year's budget for dispatch was $998,000. And 25's budget is $929.
Yep.
So we saved $60,000 in the changes and the adjustments of staffing, roughly.
From this line item, part of the increase back up is that we have, so Randy is now working as our public safety analyst, and previously when I was the analyst, my salary was entirely allocated from the administration budget line. As Randy is functionally overseeing the dispatch center, a large portion of his salary is allocated from the dispatch line. So overall in the budget, we have seen a several $100,000 saving, but in this particular line item, you're correct, it is not here in this line item anymore. And so what I mean by that overall in the budget, last year when we proposed the budget, we were overspending by 1.5 million
On the original.
on the original budget. And so this year we're down to just about $1 million. So we've managed to cut $500,000 in expenses from last year's proposal to this year's proposal.
I'm looking at Open Gov and it's $998. We can discuss that
Yeah.
later. It was just a question.
Okay.
The 1.5 is the entire general
Yeah.
fund. $500,000 is the entire general.
The savings are elsewhere in the general fund, I guess is what I'm trying to say, not in this line item.
Okay.
Are the additional, you said East Sparta and Tri something?
Mhm.
Is that included in the 2025 budget yet?
Yeah, that's that 60,000
Okay,
in
all right.
dispatching fees.
What is,
We thought
what
it'd
is
be
the
70,
second one?
and it
I've heard of
was
East Sparta,
So,
obviously.
Tri-Division is the EMS service for that area.
Okay,
They
Right.
share a station,
okay.
but the village of East Sparta only employs firefighters, and Tri-Division EMS employs EMT.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's my home community, so that's why I know
Huh?
that.
Okay, major projects for them for next year, 2 police cruisers, which is our normal replacement schedule, $145,000. Replacing 4 portable radios for the police department, $24,000. The dispatch radio console that we ended up moving forward with after deciding to keep dispatch. This will be year 2 of 5, $55,650. And then this one I want to spend a little bit more time on, police department renovations. So at currently an estimated $1.5 million. So the city of North Canton previously borrowed money through funds for public safety facilities, and with that we purchased the 1200 block of North Main Street. At the time we borrowed it, interest rates were much lower than they are today, and so we still have a wonderfully low interest rate on that money. As we sell the 1200 block, which we've been fairly successful with, we have 2 of the 4 parcels closing in the next 60 days. Our proposal is to take the money from the sale of those properties and instead of paying off the debt, using it to reinvest in our police facilities, which will enable us to make their situation better without asking the taxpayers for an increase. We have had a preliminary architectural study done, which not only confirmed that we were right in our guess for how much the HVAC system is going to cost, but also studied how much space would they truly need. And I can sense the question might be, why not just build them a new station at some point down the road? Actually, for everything they asked the architects for, the architects came back and said, if you just reorganized your lower level better, you could fit everything they want and still have about 10,000 square feet left over. Or, sorry, 1,000 square feet left over, not 10,000 square feet. The building's only 10,000, 1,000 square feet left over. And so what that says to us is they don't really need a new, bigger building. They just need a better layout for the building they're in now, not the 1972 layout that they're still in. And so that's why our proposal is to take that one-time money and reinvest it into the department and address their needs now, instead of going back to the taxpayers and asking for an increase to either build a new building at some point in the future or perform these renovations at some point.
I have very mixed opinions on this, because I look at that building and what does the HVAC system cost?
900 and some thousand.
It wasn't 975.
So let's say it's $1 million, and then we're putting in 1.5 to renovate the police station. That's $2.5 million. And then we spend X amount of dollars on with COVID money going in there. And a building's not worth $2.5 million. Period. So I do have some mixed opinions on that. And the longevity of a new building versus that building, I don't think it compares.
But I don't think we could rebuild that building. If it got knocked down, we couldn't rebuild
No
that
way.
for $2.5 million.
I don't think you're trying to rebuild the whole building. I think you're trying to rebuild the police department.
Yeah, but we still need an HVAC system regardless.
Yeah.
No way around
And then
that.
where's our
It's
admin
a
done?
huge building and it's old.
If we rebuild it, if we build a new police station, we'd have how many square foot for anything? I mean, to add anything over there.
I mean, I understand that.
It's a tough
It's a big
sell
pill to
to
swallow,
put
but
that much money in a building
we
that
haven't put
is already aged.
any money into the HVA system at all.
I don't
mean, it's
dispute the
still-
need for any of it. I mean, there's a need right now for all of that stuff. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know if that's the most efficient answer.
What type of renovations would there be in the police department?
Primarily expanding the locker room to create an equal environment for men and women. Improve the ADA accessibility. Right now, if you enter the police department, there are steps to get to and from places. And then also we have, 5 people sharing one office, so we'd make some better office spaces for them, are sort of the top 3 priorities on the list.
There's definitely the need. I mean, it's, you walk through it and it's not right what they have to deal with. But I don't know that those renovations are going to be the long-term solution for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And at $1.5 million, that's a lot of money. I mean, we said, again, nothing that the police and dispatch we have is funded. It's not, there's no separate levy for that. It's all from general revenue. Other communities have levies.
On those renovations, how many people use the bottom entrance to go upstairs?
All of the entrances are,
City
or
Hall?
you mean to General City Hall?
Yeah, in general, City Hall, just about everything.
Almost all
So
of
we'd
the
have to
entire.
retrain the people, just make that a police department entrance only, and you have so much more room.
Yeah, but you have to have people walk around the building then
Yeah,
too.
parking lots. and
No,
everything.
that wouldn't work.
How much do we spend on that turnaround?
The proposed layout does not alter the public entrances.
What's the longevity do we expect for 1.5 million for that renovation? How long do we expect that to house the police department? Is it we feel that we can make it last for the next 5 years, or we think it can be the next 10, 15? Although I don't know that anything beyond that is a realistic ask, but
It's a similar crystal ball issue to the fire department of,
Yeah.
right now, our population is stable and our calls are starting to level off. And similarly for the police department, we haven't had any major annexations in, 1-2 decades. We haven't really been expanding our jurisdiction, our population has been kind of leveling off. At the moment, we're not anticipating major jumps in service demand. And particularly for the police department, even if we are, what you're gonna add is road officers, not office supervisors, who, they just need the locker room. They don't need an office to be working out of. Their office is the cruiser. So based on current projections of how we might keep growing for the next 10 to 15 years, we believe that this will be sufficient. If you all somehow manage to annex another 10,000 people, no, this will not be sufficient.
fair enough.
I just, I walk through the police department and they have a need. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing for the police department. And I don't know if the longevity's there or not. I think we need some more professional opinion on that. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing for the police.
I mean, could you build a better station brand new? Absolutely. Could you do it for this cost? Absolutely
Right, you
not.
have quotes for the fire department.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what new houses cost? People are not building them.
I won't dispute that something better could be built brand new. It's as we talked about, is that increased level of effectiveness worth the decreased affordability?
It's a tough decision. I mean, it's not easy. I'm just throwing it out so everybody is aware of it, because I don't know what the answer is, honestly. I don't, but it just bothers me to put that much money into that building. I know the history of the building and how much money we've put into it already.
And what we need eventually, a newer communication for the dispatchers and stuff of that nature.
That's in the other budget.
I mean, are you planning to expand our center greatly? Then
Well, no, but they said that the system would last maybe 2 years. Staley said that?
that was the old radio system, which were replaced. That's what this here addresses.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'd be all right with that.
Yeah.
we're good with that.
That's a lot less than what we did before.
Matthew,
That's only 2 or 5
Oh,
years.
that's only two, okay, all right.
I understand your concerns, obviously.
Yes.
I spent some time down there myself.
Yeah.
And the diversity of our police force is almost requiring us to have better facilities for our employees. The other thing that always concerned me was security. How many times do we have citizens coming into the door when we're bringing in someone in handcuffs?
Yeah.
And some are cooperative and some aren't. And it's all hours of the days when people are coming in to file reports and things. And part of that renovations, maybe, I haven't been included in those talks, but it could be, how do we have safer access and not bringing people in the basement door that really a lot of people do, the main door
Yeah.
for, in the rear parking lot off of,
That's a good point.
and is there an opportunity there to convert our garages into more of what they used to call a sally port, where you bring a prisoner in, the door comes down, everybody is secured. So I don't know what those costs are, and from all my history there, we cannot go up. The building cannot be added a second, or third floor. So I had the same eyebrows too, like, wow, $1.5 million. But when we break it down, how do we continue to invest and maintain all the fiber that we have, the generator that we need in place, and to maintain the resources we have now rather than building a new building. And I understand completely with your concerns. And maybe once those, if we're fortunate to have renovations take place, maybe it would be, the estimate might be high, and we might, have construction costs that are lower than what we're anticipating. If I'm speaking out of turn, let me know, because you've been involved, I think, a little bit more than I have.
It was an architect's
The
engineering
architect.
estimate.
Okay, so,
We're trying to just use the best utilization of the space we have. Like, so to your point, John, the downstairs area, there is no private area for interviews. If you've ever been in, you come in, sometimes it's awkward. They're sitting there taking a report with a, person, and we have to just walk by. And, they looked at that, and they've looked at, similar to like, if you own your home and you say, gosh, we're out of space, bought this house, and now we're up to, we have 3 kids and 2 dogs, and want to go build a new home, a new home's going to cost you $500,000. Could we do an addition? Could we reconfigure the space we have and knock out this wall and open it up and maybe build another bathroom and, do these things that'll make it more livable, that'll make it more functional, that'll make the family happy, that'll make the employees happy. And that's what this is. If you've toured it, it sounds like you have, Matt. I don't know if you've ever toured it, John, and you go all the way in the back and you see the they've taken closets and made them offices for officers. And like Ben said, 5 in an office, and the locker rooms, like we said, male and female. It's a way to use some of our space in the basement, that cage area you've probably been in, that years ago when the city kept tons and tons of paperwork and boxes of paper, they needed a cage. We've done so much through the years. Finance has cleaned their cage, we've cleaned their cage, council's cleaned the cage. That's unused space, and the architects looked in there and said, how can we utilize this? So it's just laying it out, taking what we have and making it better for the people who have to work in that environment. Because a new building will not be $1.5 million, and then you have the moving costs on top of that, that Mayor referenced, and all the equipment and the tech and the radios, and that's a huge factor in considering moving our police department.
I think we've proposed this because we feel it's the most cost-effective way to promptly address the core needs of the police department. Now, I've been working with Chief Kemp and his leadership team to your point about getting a second opinion, with an architecture and engineering firm to see, is this possible, is this budget realistic? And just like with the first iteration of this fire department that we have on the architect came back and said, well, the whole wish list is not achievable.
This price.
But that's okay. Most of the time, the whole wish list is not achievable. I am confident that we can address at least the most critical things of locker rooms, ADA, space to work, and sort of as a carry-on to that, would actually address the mayor's concern about what door we're bringing prisoners in, because the current proposal from our architects would start using the, what I'm gonna call the courtyard door that's kind of hidden on the side of the building facing the bank for our prisoner entrance and exit.
That would be nice.
Well, and on a shift, I mean, with police, they are supposed to be out in the field, so truly, how often are they sitting in the office? Like on a shift, is it 2 hours, is it, I know there may be a shift lieutenant.
For the administrative staff, obviously they're here, they're
Right.
shift. I would say for a road guy, from my ride along, of their 8 hours, probably 2 of it is spent back at the, not consecutive to, but over the course of it too. For the sergeants, probably more, closer to half is back, checking patrolmen's work or filing reports or doing whatever supervisory duties need done. So the office and workspace is really for supervisors and detectives, and the patrolmen really need that locker room, that space
Right.
for equipment and gear and getting changed. And
Chief, you want to add anything?
It is an opportunity to create some much needed elbow space. We've been in this space that was built back in 1970 for a department this size. We are now this size. The offices that are shared, I have multiple sergeants hot seating one desk in an office, and then ones that can't make it in that office or end up in where our old administrative assistant is, they kind of share that desk, and then I have 3 desks in my detective bureau where I have a lieutenant sitting at one, my full-time detective, and then I have a rotational detective and a sergeant, and then heaven forbid I got somebody on light duty. Unfortunately, I've been plagued with that a little bit. They end up sharing that 3rd desk. So all the conversations are going on in that room, so there's the break for privacy there is needed. For the locker rooms, we did some of our own renovations to put additional locker rooms in when we were boosting our female personnel. Nobody takes showers at work anymore. We still would like to have a shower available in the locker rooms just in case, but we don't need a big, I think I heard somebody use it, a YMCA style shower description anymore. We need one single space for them. But we do need the locker space for them, and I don't want them shoved into, the female officers that I have, I respect, I don't want them shoved into a small little space when they look at, the space that's in the male locker room, but I also have unused space because I have one of those multi-faucet head showers that it ends up being a place where they hang the raincoats when they come in. We put time into the design with the architects. We've asked for some things, we've sacrificed some things, and the change, one of the biggest things I focus on is the locker room, the office spaces, so we can break up the office spaces a little bit. We'll get into the point of being cognizant with the architects of going, okay, how much does this wall cost? We're going to go to that point of how much does this wall cost to break down? Because we have a finite amount of money to spend on this opportunity at this point. What is the most that we can get for what we're doing? Is there, we can leave that wall stand, we can sacrifice this space over here. On the first floor, the way this building was built, the chief's office was built with its own private restroom. But yet I have dispatchers that have to go down steps to go use the restrooms downstairs, or they have to go back out to the lobby. One of the other things I've heard my guys say, and that was pointed out, was as we bring in the community to take reports from them, you're right, we bring them in right next to some place where we could be handling a drunk. So they're kind of mixed in there. Somebody's having their worst day. Well, 2 people are having their worst day, but the one brought it on themselves and the other one's a victim of something. We've discussed potentially repurposing some space in the lobby, which I think would be on the cheaper side to do on the project. to have a privacy space out there. We might have to move the pop machine, but we have a privacy space out there, so when people come in, we could handle their situations out there and not bring them in where we're doing the rest of the business of the department. So, you know, I cannot give you an answer as to how long, but I can tell you that we've been in the space that we're in now since 1970.
Yeah.
And we've looked at everything that we could do with our skills to repurpose space. We used to have a photo lab. The photo lab is no longer there. All the cabinets and everything were torn out, we capped off the plumbing. And as you said, it is now a small little closet space that was turned into an office space.
The biggest renovation was when we took the jail cells out, made that our evidence lockers, or our evidence room. And as he alluded, just when you're, with only, I think we reconfigured the report room almost 3 times when I was chief of police, as a lieutenant chief of police. We reconfigured that because the issues there too was we were bringing prisoners and we're handcuffing them to a chair. Okay, and then we then we moved that up to how can we secure that prisoner or that arrestee, let's put it that way, that arrestee to a more secure metal, and then they're pulling the desk away, okay? And so there's, that may not be that expensive, but it's reconfiguring the space, and I think you hit it on too, Matt, and Chief. How can we look at that space again and get the best use out of it? And again, I spent my entire career down there, and I saw the renovations and what we put up with over the years. And again, sometimes police work is 7 hours and 55 minutes of boredom, and it could be 5 minutes of sheer terror. And you don't know, any night you can have 3 prisoners in there, or arrestees, or none, and you come down on a 4 o'clock afternoon, and your daughter's bicycle was taken from school, and we're bringing somebody in that a shoplifter or something. It's just I really like to try to make it so that we're not bringing prisoners or arrestees in, or on the main doors. But there's more. I'm not going to belabor the point. I know we have more to get through, but you brought up some good concerns. It warrants a little bit more discussion.
No dispute on the need.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
It's the cost. I understand. We'll get the most for our buck.
Yeah.
We have one last item for police and dispatch, which is not on my slide, because it's not a project, that it is a proposal that is contained in this budget. And that is, right now, Chief Kemp has himself outside the union, and then 7 supervisors in the union, and then his regular patrol people. We would like to propose transitioning one of those 7 union supervisors into an assistant chief's position. So a second salaried overtime exempt position to give Chief Kemp some backup to help with some of those administrative tasks, which in past in other departments we've had issues with people on the schedule, making the schedule. We've addressed things like that. In doing that, we would not backfill one of the 7 positions. Whoever gets promoted, we would not fill it. So basically, we want to keep the same number of FTEs, just move one out of the union into a salaried overtime exempt.
Kind of the same format as firemen.
Same format.
Yes.
Makes sense. Okay. Next department, Parks and Lands. This is our second big department that we expect to need income tax every single year. So we know going into it they will need income tax, but they do have some more substantial outside revenue sources than the police department. So recreation rental facilities, every time you rent the Civic Center or Dogwood or a park shelter, those fees come back into the Parks Department. Our net profit from Dogwood Pool, our net profit from Arrowhead, which we budgeted 0 because we're currently in the process of doing an RFP, so we don't really know what next year might look like yet. And then rent from leased buildings. Currently, we own some properties throughout the city as part of our land banking efforts, and we have tenants who pay us rent. Those come back into this budget. And then finally, income tax, about $2 million is their largest support. So unlike all the other general fund departments that we've talked about, they do spend most of their budget on capital and operating because they do provide public infrastructure and mow the lawn and plant flowers and replace trees and all those wonderful things. So their cost centers are the rental facilities, Civic, Dogwood, all those. It's a little higher than their revenues this year because we have, as you'll see on the next slide, some renovations proposed for this building, so that raises it higher than normal. Our Dogwood pool operating and repair costs, which will be on the next slide, our Arrowhead costs, just general land and building maintenance line, which is all of the property the city owns that isn't for the water system and isn't a park. So City Hall is the best example I have for you off the top of my head right now. And then the Parks Department, which handles our 13 parks and recreation facilities throughout the city. So next year, they have the most major projects, and I'm sorry if it's tiny print and you can't read. So first, next year, we'd like to do a parks master plan to really get a better sense of what our capital investment needs are, where improvements need to go, those sorts of things, and we've estimated that at $60,000. I believe it's called Mary Price Courtyard, but there's a small courtyard between City Hall and the bank next door. The bricks in that courtyard need re-leveled and poly-sanded according to their regular maintenance schedule next year. That's $15,800. At Arrowhead, we'd like to complete the men's bathhouse, which is sort of the last building that needs renovated out there. And then we'd also like to, using the city's paving machine, which is the perfect width for it, repave about $40,000 worth of park paths in-house instead of contracting. At Dogwood Pool, we have some splash pad repairs that need to be made per a health department order. The boiler needs some repair, some of the fundrellas need replaced, and then we'd like to sort of repaint and replace the concession stand sign, and just some basic exterior facelift on the outside of the concession stand. All of those things together come to $26,500. At Dogwood, we just put a new roof on Dogwood Shelter last year. This year we'd like to redo the front door, the entrance, which also has some water airtight issues, and then some other outside exterior work to the lawn. We have a more sidewalk than we think we need there, and we will reduce it and make it more ADA compliant. At Price Park, we received a $300,000 capital state grant for adaptive improvements, which I'll let Catherine come back and explain more on. Here at the Civic Center, we'd like to, on the banquet hall side, install some improved handicap accessibility things, such as a push button to open the doors, maybe a new curb ramp, those sorts of things. And then for everywhere on the building except for that hallway and the banquet hall, we'd like to replace all the single pane windows with more modern, more energy efficient double pane, including this room, so the windows might open. And then finally, the Parks Garage parking lot needs repaved. We were going to try and do it in-house, but we do not have a asphalt milling machine large enough to really make that a reasonable project to do in-house. So it will probably be contracted out at about $75,000. Catherine, do you want to jump in on any of these things?
Real quick, the paths, would that be asphalt?
The car paths, yeah.
Okay.
With our asphalt paving machine.
Gotcha. I didn't know if there was a different.
The Price Park Adaptive Improvements, that's the grant we got. They got.
It's a grant we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're looking to make the fishing pond more adaptive, and as well as some other entrances into the playground area. The walking path from the parking lot needs a few more adapted. The 300's not a lot, we asked for a lot more, to do a lot more, so we're gonna do what we can with it. But mainly expanding the concrete around the pool, make the fishing area more adaptive, and they have to address the gazebo itself. It's messed up.
Next department. So our next department in the general fund is economic development. So in economic development, we've dedicated our hotel tax, our share of the state's liquor permit license fees, Dora Cup sales. The other is we have another demolition grant for next year for our fire station site. And then income tax makes up the rest of the revenues for the economic development department. And so that's spent on, I don't know why this TV keeps doing that, but that's spent on the economic development department itself with Jason, our new economic development gentleman. Our community events budget comes out of this economic development line, and for this year, we have tried to match that community events budget to what is brought in by the hotel tax and the liquor permits. The farmer's market, should it continue, also comes out of our economic development. And then I have included this line transfer to CSC because historically, sometimes council has transferred money to the CSC. You'll see on the next slide, or in 2 slides, there's also a line for transfers from the CIC for years when we get money from the CIC. Similar to parks, they spend more money on operating, putting on events, grants, those sorts of things. Our major projects for next year are the community events budget, which I just touched on, and then at 1206, the office building. We would love to sell it, and if any of you know anyone who has a need for a lovely office building, feel free to send them our way. But at the moment, we have no takers. So we've been meeting with a gentleman who is a potential new tenant who would like to turn the space into, best way to describe it is essentially a permanent farmer's market of a bunch of little local
Incubator.
That's what I was
Yeah.
saying,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's the word I
Yeah,
was
not a
looking for.
permanent farmer's market. Yeah.
And so if that deal were to come to fruition, they have asked us to put some money forward to renovating the space. So we have tentatively budgeted in here about $75,000 to renovate the building into an incubator space.
And you said that would be a tenant situation?
They would be our tenant, yes.
Okay.
But they would rent a majority of it out.
Wow.
And
And the
then they would
renovations.
sublease to
Yeah.
entrepreneurs who don't want a full office space for themselves.
Yeah.
The renovations are really necessary there too, since we lost so many down on the one side, the, therapy group that took, 7, 8 spaces? And when they left, they all left. So they had also renovated that area, they had their own entrance and their own reception area, and so it needs.
It's a little disjointed.
What is the square footage of that building? Because I feel like it's deceiving.
It's much larger than you think.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
you go by and you don't think that it's that big, but I feel like it's bigger than what it looks
If
like.
I remember correctly from my sketching of City Hall in there, 15,000 square feet.
I would not have guessed 15,000
Oh, yeah,
square
you
feet.
walk in and there's offices on both sides of the hallway. There's a main, it's
Okay.
very large. I like the idea of an
They
incubator.
wouldn't
Yeah.
take the whole
Right.
15,000.
Right.
So the separate tenant spaces on the right wing would stay separate tenant spaces, and then the left wing would.
Where
be
it's
this new
mainly
tenant.
vacant.
When you have tenants in a building, it sells for a
Oh, certainly.
higher price.
Certainly.
Better
So,
than empty
yeah.
rooms.
Is it envisioned as like offices for, my business I own, or like a shop for the things I'm gonna sell, or is it be anything in, Everything in
Think more
between.
like grocery store-esque, so like, in your ward, Suite B.
Yes.
If she wanted a more permanent retail space, she could
so it would
rent
be like
a
retail as
shelf
opposed to office,
in
yeah.
this retail space.
It's a neat
to
idea.
display her product. They provide the cashier and the checkout.
Yeah, neat idea.
more for makers.
Yeah.
And then our last piece of the general fund is the everything else that we touched on earlier that it takes to make the government function. So lighting your streets, our public health district, information technology, legal services. This other operating is that income tax collection fees, banking fees, all those wonderful things. And again, that's primarily funded off of income tax, and nobody actually works in any of these departments, so it's all operating. So that all comes together into your general fund. And so on the left here, we have revenues for the general fund, primarily income tax. And then on the right here, we have the expenses. There is one piece of this pie for all of the departments we just went through together, plus an extra piece of the pie, and that's this transfers right here. So in addition to all of these departments that come out of the general fund, which are in alphabetical order, by the way, we also transfer some income tax money to other departments that are not part of the general fund to help them break even. And so, at least if you're only looking at it from an income tax perspective, this is what starts to create our operating revenue. It's a very nuanced thing, and we'll get back to that. But so let's move on to what are the departments where these transfers are going. So the first department that is getting an income tax transfer is our fire and EMS department. So they have two levies. They have their EMS levy and their fire levy. And they also collect EMS billing, but they still need income tax in order to break even. So they have three cost centers: fire suppression, fire prevention, EMS. I want to note that this does not include their capital costs. This is just to operate the department, not to buy new trucks. And so next year, all told, they're about $5.38 million to operate.
And what does the levy cover? The amount? I'm just trying to figure the
35
shortfall.
plus 17%. Somebody has
Income tax is still supplementing almost a third.
A third, okay.
$895 and
31%.
$18730.
So,
Thanks.
I guess maybe I should have noted this earlier, but important thing to note that this pie chart does not match these percentages because the fund balances are not in the revenue, because that's not revenue for the year. That's what you saved from last year. Just in case anybody was about to call me on, wait, what does it say for budget? All right. There are major projects for next year. And I'm really mad that there is no fire engine clip art. So the engine rescue, this is year 2 of 10, so we started this last year, $180,000. Engine 9, which you all just approved auctioning, is going to be replaced by a mini pumper engine, which is a much smaller truck than this one, and we can therefore afford to buy free and clear in 1 year. We have an ambulance replacement, which is year 1 of 3, $130,000. By the time we've done paying for this one, we'll have the next ambulance. These are on a rotation like police cruisers. And then the assistant chief vehicle, which is currently an old police cruiser, is being replaced this year for $70,000. Our second department that gets an income tax transfer is the street and roads department. So they're primarily funded by the state gas tax, and then we also have our street levy. So an important thing to note on the street department is these two blue lines at the top can only be spent on the line they're on. So street levy can only be spent on levy paving, not personnel. Municipal road funds can only be spent on paving, not personnel. That's why they're highlighted blue, and why they have a separate total here that isn't part of it. But primarily the actual street department, not our special paving funds, are funded from the state of Ohio through various state programs, the gas tax, license registration, permissive license. And then for next year, we're budgeting that they might need another $300,000 in income tax. We had a similar transfer in 2024 budgeted, But so far, our gas tax revenues have been higher than expected, that we haven't actually had to use that transfer yet this year. As a department that provides a lot of public infrastructure, their budget is much more split down the middle between personnel and operating and capital costs. Major projects for next year. Main Street is being repaved. Warning everyone, Main Street is being repaved from 7th Street all the way to Rose Lane, and then cross the bridge from Knoll to the Corp line.
That's amazing.
Our share of this $1.13 million project is only $120,000. Go Rob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Also next year, West Maple is being paved. Fair warning, West Maple is being paved from the square all the way to Lindy Lane, so right before the Parks Garage. It's a $264,000 project that our share is $50,000. Again, props to Rob. It is year 4 of 4 for both our salt dome rehab project and the asphalt paving equipment. So that's $110,000 and $79,000 respectively. Both of those are done next year, and that money will be freed up again for other capital. They would like to place one of these salt dump plow trucks this year. It will be financed over 2 years, so year 1 is $150,000. And then using our paving machine, we are budgeting for $100,000 worth of asphalt to pave whatever alleys get chosen next by our street superintendent next year. Most of the alleys we did this year were in Ward 2. And so that brings us to sort of the last piece of our budget here, which is the capital improvement fund. So as we've been going through all these departments, we've been talking about their major projects for the year. Lots of those major projects are not funded from the revenue expenses slides we looked at, but from this capital improvements budget, which is funded primarily off of income tax. And we are required to transfer income tax to this fund every year. We have to do it by local law. In addition, next year, as we talked about with police department renovations, we have the sale of assets from the 1200 block that we would like to take a big chunk of that police department project. And so the left side here is your revenues, which is normally just income tax grants and other, but this year we have sale of assets. And then all of your, each slice of this pie is where it is going by department. So where are your capital dollars going by department? And so you'll see on here, most of the departments we talked about, plus this last chunk of debt service, which we haven't touched on. So in addition to all the fun projects we've gone through that we get to build next year, we also have some debt service, which is about $800,000. Altogether, about $800,000. Most of which is from lands we hold for resale, so our land bank property. And so as we sell those properties, we hope to reduce our amount of debt. But at the moment, this is what is sort of taking a chunk of our capital improvement. So to wrap up, once again, here is your 2025 budget proposal. Approximately 2/3, one each, go to public utilities and public safety, another 15% on public services, 12% on everything else, and then finally 4% on minimum. To return to that initial question of why are we here, how did we get in a crisis, now that we've gone through the whole budget, for problem 1, our operating deficit, as you've hopefully seen, we have 5 major functions: fire, police, dispatch, parks, and streets, that are all competing for a limited pool of income tax. Cuts in any one are going to be publicly felt. And so in order to avoid harsh public cuts is why we propose overspending by roughly millions here. For problem 2 and our capital investment limitations, first, there's sort of a hidden factor, which is that all of our major capital assets were built in the early 1970s, and so they're all turning 50 at the same time. But on top of that, we have a not insignificant amount of our capital dollars tied up in debt. that if we can help to reduce that debt, we can do more capital projects. To address these two problems, this budget we propose to you all tries to strike that balance between affordable and effective to continue to provide a high level of service for all 14 departments, but still capitalize on opportunities presented to reduce costs, like creating an in-house building department. Thank you, everyone, and I'm sorry it took so long, but it was good, necessary.
Good conversation.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent
thank you.
job.
Good job, Ben. And team.
Everybody.
That was everybody, 100%.
He ended on the building department. Can I just say, publicly announce our new chief building official is Mr. Martin Van Gundy.
No.
He started today. We'd all like to welcome him to the city. We did post it. We had several people apply. Well, we, interviewed the first candidate, and the first candidate was the successful candidate.
That's great.
Nice job.
Yeah.
Welcome, Marty.
Yes.
Welcome.
He has a new department to rebuild.
Yes, he does. So we'll begin the other position postings
That's great.
now. Okay.
All right, you guys want to talk about anything else?
Yeah.
Floor is open.
I gotta go back to the dispatch question. 24 budget, $1,033,634. The 25 budget, 929. It's $100,000 difference. I guess council members that said, yes, we need to keep this, we need to come up with $200,000 or $300,000 more in savings on this budget. I know that in the past, income has exceeded. This is a conservative income, the way I see it, which I think is a good thing. I think you've trimmed a lot of projects, but I still see us $300,000 short of where we probably should be on this budget.
And are you looking at that just because the dispatch and what we said we'd save?
What we said we would save, we got 2 people working 2 shifts, spending 50% of their time waiting for their next phone call.
Yeah.
I think East Sparta, I think that it was 2 calls a day is what they produce. It's not enough to fill that gap.
No.
And I think that those residents that spoke and the council members that said, let's keep dispatch, there's going to be some effectiveness that's going to go away because of affordability.
I have a question. There was a number of vehicles, equipment we're gonna be purchasing, and cars and stuff. Are they really needed? Or is it to stay with the program? Sure, a police cruiser or a fire chief. Is that dump truck for the street department, if we sold it, would we gain money back, or how? This was an easy winter, so we had to have some savings in that department. But next year, if it's a bad winter, would the truck make it for that year?
The street department has been waiting for the debt to roll off before, they've asked to replace this dump truck for 3 years now. And since this is the final year for their salt dome and the asphalt paving equipment, and we have to meet a capital threshold of 30% of the first 1% of income tax, it falls within that.
And we are trying very hard to get back to a rotation. So in those 2008 cuts, we got off of a rotation schedule. And what that means is, like, the fire department has four very expensive pieces of apparatus that all need replaced at the same time because we got off of that replacement schedule. Or ambulances, in an ideal schedule with our 4, we would start 1 every 3rd year, but because we got off that schedule and had a fleet of 4 aging, we've now started a new ambulance every 2 years at the time I've been here instead of every 3.
That's a multi-million-dollar catch-up on that. I mean, that's not just the small thing that you mentioned there. That's huge.
So I understand where you're coming from, but actually from a cost savings for taxpayers, if we can get back onto a regular
Yeah.
rotation, you'll be in a better end position. That's part of what the capital investment plan is intended to try and address, is better plan out these sorts of things.
So if we could, maybe one of the vehicles or something, to try to make up this $200,000-300,000 that Dave was talking about.
That's not in the general fund, it's in the capital fund.
Okay.
Oftentimes too with our police cruisers, John, we've even tried doing maintenance every other month. And what we found over time is, those cars are out there 24/7, some of them. And if we're not doing monthly maintenance on them, the cost of repairs starts to go up, whether it's transmission, tires, suspensions, brakes and things. I know that's always been a concern, but getting into a rotation of 2 or 3 cars, and then if we can repurpose those cars even, and they still may last for another 4 or 5 years in another department.
Right.
And I'm not sure, we may have some things that might go to auction this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then, we'll get a
We always
couple
auction.
bucks there,
Okay.
but,
Or trade in or sale to another government entity like Engine 9 that you all approve.
fleet maintenance is a real issue, and I think all our department heads really try to
Well, it's with
make it live
all of vehicles.
as long as they can.
Okay. Any other discussions? Anything else?
Moment.
All right.
All I would say is if you have questions this week, let's get them to them so that they have answers, that before we come to the meeting next week, just think it makes it easier and they're ready to go, and if they need to get any sheets for us.
Yep, sounds good. I'll make the motion to move item 3A to the council agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And moving on to 3B.
This ties to the budget, so Gina, do you want to talk about this, please?
So every year we present to you the rates and fees, which is the schedule of all things the city charges for. The auditors use this resolution as an acknowledgement to tie back the charges of what we're collecting or charging fees for. So this is just an all-inclusive list of all the things the city charges. So the water rates, and this was established by an ordinance a few years ago, the water rates are increasing by 5% through 2026 each year. The sewer rates, the North Canton portion is at 15%, it's just the administrative fee. We looked at EMS rates, and those are matched with the maximum that would be reimbursed with Medicare, or there's a top 5 insurance companies that we also look at, what their rates would be on reimbursement. So we adjust those annually. The gear on the fire and EMS that you see listed, there's a replacement cost. So we don't make money on it, but we do have to replace them if they get damaged. I don't know if you had any other questions. The rental registration, all those sorts of fees that were set before, I believe those are all still the same. The permit fees, I don't believe any of those have been increased either. And then the rental fees for shelters and fields and buildings, those are adjusted maybe slightly, just based on market rates.
Shelters and fields stayed the same. When we did our rate study, we found we were breaking even on our replacement cycle for the shelters. Dogwood went up slightly, and then for Civic Center, we have in this resolution for you what we found to be the kind of standard going rate for similar wedding venues of a similar size. That will ultimately be determined by the RFP process currently ongoing for management of this facility.
Have we gotten any people inquiring about that?
We have had a few, and we're still in the review process of scoring those RFPs.
move item 3B to the council agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to personnel and safety data.
So this is the terms of engagement with Rickard Graydon to provide legal services to the city. We went through that process, we went through the interview process. The terms of engagement state that Brendan Kyle will be appointed the law director, that the compensation has been negotiated to $10,000 per month for standard legal services. Non-standard legal services, litigation is set forth, will be billed at an agreed upon rate, which is blended at $305 an hour. So, and then hourly service be billed at a tenth of an hour to structure that negotiation. Anything else you wanted to add to the negotiations with our new law firm?
We only have 3 currently pending items that would fall in that other category. The Boric lawsuit, which is being handled by our insurance counsel, so we shouldn't be billed by Bricker for that. We are in a lawsuit with a company called CF Homes. They challenged our rental registration ordinance. We won that initially, but they are in their appeals right now. Bricker will be taking that one over, and then
No, they won't. No,
those
those,
take over CF Homes, but not.
no, both of them. I mean, they just felt, Brendan just asked if they could, Kugliak could see them through. That it would almost, you know, be starting over all the
Yeah.
players.
That makes sense,
The
yeah.
bill is due.
It was a late call.
Yeah, it was kind of a late call. So we talked to Kugliak and just today, and they said that's absolutely fine. You know, they'll go ahead and see those through. The other one also is Brown. So
Julius Brown, District
Julius
Attorney
Brown and
Yeah.
CF
of
Homes.
Charlotte.
MRR Law is the insurance company that has the order case.
How much of a saving going to the new firm?
Well, we like that we have the more of a known monthly fee. You see what the monthly fee is there. There was an unknown before. It was whatever was spent. So now we can plan for that. And I think, did you provide to them the average hours we were using? We can kind of look at what was being spent based on an hourly rate and the hours that we were using previously. So this looks good, and we don't know what we don't know.
No.
We're going into, we don't know how much we will utilize the law firm, what lawsuits potentially are gonna come up, hopefully, how many.
Last year we spent quite a bit of money.
We have the past couple of years, but we also had a lot of economic development, we had a lot of real estate
Yeah.
transactions, we had other
And the
things out
real
of our
estate, that would be
control.
special, correct?
Well, in your packets, it did list what was the standard services and what's outside of that,
Right.
so read those, and you'll see when the 305 an hour rate gets engaged.
I think real
Other than
estate was
that,
one of those.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So like general employment inquiries, questions, that's all under the 10,000 a month retainer. I could call as much as I wanted with general employment inquiries. If I had a major employment issue, we had to have an investigation or termination, that would go into the hourly rate.
We felt it was prudent for Kugliak to continue with the cases that they started, for them to have, see it through completion. And we felt that was the best move, at least I did, and we pretty much agreed.
That was smart.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'll make a motion to approve the terms of engagement with Rickard Graydon, LLP, to provide legal services to the city of North Canton.
Second.
It's, all in favor? It's voice vote.
Oh, voice vote.
Voice.
Is
All in
voice
favor?
vote
Yeah.
roll call? I don't know.
No, it's
what's-
just all
okay.
in favor.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so Bricker Graydon shall submit a member attorney to serve as director and be sworn in at the next regular council meeting.
And I have already spoken with Mr. Heil of the firm, and he intends to be who
Okay.
takes it over pursuant to the RFP response. So he'll be here next week.
Great.
Fantastic.
All right. Welcome, Brandon. Brendan or Brandon? I keep doing that.
Brendan.
Brendan, yes. Thank you. All right. Okay, and then moving on to utilities, formerly Rush.
All right, well, thank you very much. So this item, as we have been seeing some activity up at the old Kmart property, this is in regards to the parcels that are out towards the street, most specifically for the new Chick-fil-A and the new Seven Brew parcel. So this would be for a water line easement to those properties. So anything else from administration?
Pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
just making a water line that then tees off for the two businesses.
Yep.
Construction has started, if you've been up there in the North Main area.
Right,
Seven Brew is under construction.
very cool. So, any questions, comments from anybody else? All right, with that, I would move we put this on the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?